You know what's crazy? We were told this system worked. Like if you just did what you were supposed to do, went to school, got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, worked hard, life would eventually line up. You get a stable job. You move into your own place. Maybe you buy a house one day. Build something. Feel secure. That was the deal. And most of us actually believed it. But somewhere along the way, the price of that deal quietly doubled, then tripled, then exploded. And nobody told us until we were already locked in. The average age of a first-time homebuyer in America is now around 40 years old. 40. Our parents were buying houses in their 20s. Some of our grandparents bought homes on a single-income working factory jobs. Now we are being told it's normal to rent into middle age while saving six figures just to qualify for a down payment. At the same time, wages haven't kept up with the cost of living for decades. Adjusted for inflation, real wages have barely moved since the 1970s. But productivity? Up massively? Corporate profits? At record highs. Stock markets hitting new peaks while layoffs keep breaking records. So people are working harder than ever, producing more than ever, and somehow affording less than ever. And then we get blamed for it. We're told we don't work hard enough, that we're entitled, that we spend too much on coffee, that we should just move somewhere cheaper, that if we really wanted success, we grind harder like previous generations did. But here's the part nobody wants to talk about. Previous generations were playing a completely different economic game. Housing was cheap relative to income. College was affordable. Healthcare wasn't a financial landmine. One salary could support a family. Pensions existed. Job loyalty meant something. If you worked hard, the system actually rewarded you. Today, the same milestones cost exponentially more while pay barely moved. That's not a motivation problem. That's a math problem. In the 1980s, the average home cost around 3 times the average household income. Today, it's 6 to 8 times in many cities. College used to cost a few $1,000s a year. Now, total degrees routinely pass $100,000. Rent has doubled in places where wages barely increased. Healthcare premiums cost more than some people's yearly savings. So when someone says, just work harder, what they're really saying is this generation should outperform every generation in history just to reach the same basic life milestones. And that should immediately sound insane. Because no society has ever functioned long-term when each generation had to work dramatically harder just to live worse. The American dream wasn't destroyed overnight. It was quietly repriced. And the people who already own assets benefited massively while everyone entering adulthood got crushed. Homes stopped being places to live and became investment vehicles. Corporations started buying neighborhoods. Wall Street figured out how to turn rent into a permanent profit stream. Student loans turned education into lifelong debt. Healthcare became a billing maze designed to extract as much money as possible. Companies shifted from rewarding workers to maximizing shareholder returns. The system didn't break. It evolved, just not for us. Every major cost in life inflated faster than income, while wealth concentrated at the top. That's why you can have record corporate profits alongside record layoffs. That's why you can have booming markets while people can't afford groceries. That's why young adults with degrees are living with their parents longer than any generation in modern history. This isn't about laziness. It's about structural changes that quietly shifted who the economy works for. And the craziest part is most of us were never taught this. We were told the same success formula our parents used still applied. Go to school, get a job, work hard. Everything will work out. But nobody updated the formula for asset inflation, corporate consolidation, financialization, and cost of living explosions. It's like being told to run the same race, except now the finish line is twice as far away and the ground is on fire. And when you struggle, they say you're just not trying hard enough. So today I want to talk about how the American dream was quietly repriced, how housing, education, healthcare, and work all shifted into systems that extract more while giving less. And why Gen Z isn't failing, We're navigating an economy that was redesigned without us in mind. Because once you actually look at the numbers, once you understand how the incentives change, something becomes very clear. This isn't a personal failure story. It's a system story. And if we don't talk about it honestly, every generation after us is going to have it even worse. Let's start with the biggest thing that changed the dream itself: housing. Because housing used to be the foundation of stability in America. It was how families built wealth. It was how you created security. It was the thing that made everything else feel possible. But somewhere along the way, homes stopped being shelter first and started being financial assets first. Back in the 1970s and 80s, the average home cost about 2 to 3 times the average household income. That meant if you worked a normal job, saving for a down payment was realistic. Your mortgage didn't eat your entire paycheck. And once you bought, your housing costs stayed relatively stable while your income usually increased. Today, that ratio is completely broken. In many cities, homes now cost 6, 7, even 8 times the average household income. In some metro areas, it's even worse. That means the same house that once took a few years of saving now requires decades. A normal 20% down payment can easily be over $100,000. And that's before closing costs, before repairs, before property taxes, before insurance. Most people my age will never be able to save that while paying modern rent prices, because rent has exploded too. In a lot of cities, rent has doubled in less than 10 years. Meanwhile, wages barely moved. So, what used to be a temporary stage of life before buying a home has turned into a permanent trap where your income goes straight to landlords instead of savings. And here's the part that really changed the game. Housing didn't just get expensive by accident. It was intentionally turned into an investment market. Large corporations, private equity firms, and institutional investors started buying massive numbers of single-family homes. Entire neighborhoods in some cities are now owned by companies whose only goal is to extract rent every month and resell at higher prices later. When you're competing with billion-dollar funds that can pay cash and waive inspections, normal people don't stand a chance. Add in zoning laws that make it illegal to build enough housing in the places where jobs actually exist, and you get permanent scarcity. Less supply, more demand, higher prices forever. The system is working exactly how it was designed to work, just not for people trying to live in it. And while housing was getting financialized, education was getting repriced too. College used to be a ladder into the middle class. Public universities were affordable. Many people worked part-time and paid tuition without massive loans. Student debt existed, but it wasn't a life sentence. Now the average cost of a 4-year degree regularly passes 6 figures. And the average student loan borrower leaves school already tens of thousands of dollars behind before they even earn their first paycheck. So instead of building savings in your 20s, you're paying debt. Instead of investing early, you're covering interest. Instead of moving forward, you're catching up. And people will say, well, just don't go to college. But here's the trap. Most decent paying jobs now require degrees just to get past automated resume filters. So you're forced into debt just to qualify for the job market, and then the job market pays barely enough to survive. It's like buying an expensive ticket just to enter a game that no longer pays out. At the same time, healthcare became another massive financial risk. One emergency can wipe out years of savings. Insurance premiums keep rising, deductibles keep rising. People stay in jobs they hate because they can't risk losing coverage. So now your education puts you in debt. Your housing eats your income, and your health care keeps you trapped. That's not freedom. That's economic pressure. And all this happened while work itself changed. Companies used to reward loyalty. They invested in workers. They offered pensions. Raises generally match productivity growth. Now it's all about quarterly profits. Stock buybacks instead of wage increases. Layoffs even during record earnings. Jobs turn into disposable contracts rather than careers. Meanwhile, productivity kept climbing. Technology made workers more efficient than ever in history. But instead of sharing those gains with employees, most of the money flowed upward to executives and shareholders. So the same effort that once built a stable life now barely covers survival. That's the price change nobody warned us about. We were taught the old rules while the economy quietly rewrote them. Work hard and you'll succeed. Except now hard work mostly enriches people who already own assets. And the hardest workers are often the most financially stressed. So when older generations say they did it, and we should too, they're not lying about their experience. They're just describing a system that no longer exists. They climbed the ladder that got pulled up behind them. Not because they personally chose it, but because policies, corporations, and financial systems reshaped the economy in ways that rewarded ownership over labor. And Gen Z entered adulthood right after that transformation was complete, which is why so many of us feel like we're running nonstop and still falling behind, because we are. The dream didn't disappear. It just became drastically more expensive while pay stayed the same. And in the next part, I want to talk about something even deeper, how wealth quietly shifted upward over the last few decades, why inequality exploded, and how this isn't just about housing or college or jobs. It's about an economy that was redesigned to funnel more and more to the top while telling everyone else to hustle harder. To really understand what happened, you have to zoom out and look at where the money actually went. Because while life got more expensive for everyone entering adulthood, wealth exploded for the people who already owned things. Over the last 40 years, productivity kept rising. Technology made companies more efficient. Workers produced more value per hour than any generation before them. But wages didn't follow. Instead, profits did. The share of income going to workers shrank, while the share going to executives and shareholders grew. Stock markets multiplied. Asset prices skyrocketed. Real estate surged. Meanwhile, paychecks barely moved. So if you owned homes, stocks, or businesses, you got richer fast. If you worked for a paycheck, you fell behind. That's the quiet wealth transfer nobody talks about. It wasn't one law. It wasn't one politician. It was decades of small changes that all pushed money upward. Tax structures that favored capital over labor. Financial markets that rewarded short-term profits over long-term workers. Corporations buying back stock instead of raising wages. Housing policies that protected property values over affordability. Education systems that shifted costs onto students. Healthcare systems designed around billing instead of care. Every major system slowly tilted toward ownership instead of participation. And the result is what we're living in now. The richest households hold more wealth than the bottom half of the country combined. CEOs make hundreds of times more than the average worker. Corporate profits hit record highs while people struggle to afford rent. This isn't because people suddenly stopped working hard. It's because the rules change. The economy used to reward building a life. Now it rewards owning assets. And the earlier you own them, the bigger the advantage. That's why millennials who bought homes 10 years ago are in a totally different financial position than Gen Z today. That's why boomers who bought houses for $50,000 now sit on properties worth $500,000 or more. That's why investors who bought stocks decades ago built massive wealth without working extra hours. Meanwhile, anyone starting from zero today is playing catch-up in an inflated economy. It's like showing up to a game after the scoreboard already ran up, and then being told you're losing because you're not trying hard enough. Even the job market itself became part of this shift. Companies realized they could automate, outsource, and downsize while still increasing profits. So loyalty disappeared. Pensions disappeared. Long-term stability disappeared. Jobs became temporary stepping stones instead of careers. At the same time, the hiring process got more brutal. Entry-level jobs now ask for years of experience. Automated systems reject resumes before humans ever see them. Hundreds or thousands of applicants compete for one role. So you spend months applying, interviewing, doing unpaid projects only to get ghosted. And if you finally land something, there's no guarantee it lasts. Layoffs happen even when companies are profitable. People get cut to boost stock prices. Workers become numbers on spreadsheets. And when you combine that with debt, high rent, and rising costs, you get constant financial stress. That's why so many people my age feel anxious about the future. It's not because we're fragile. It's because the margin for error disappeared. One emergency can wreck you. One layoff can drain your savings. One medical bill can put you behind for years. Previous generations have buffers, affordable housing, stable jobs, lower debt. Today, most of us are operating with none. And this pressure isn't accidental. An economy built around asset growth naturally squeezes everyone who doesn't own assets yet. High housing prices are great for landlords and investors. High stock prices are great for shareholders. Low wages boost profit margins. Student debt guarantees payments. Rising healthcare costs drive massive industry profits. Every major pain point for regular people is a revenue stream for someone else, which is why the system keeps moving in this direction. It's profitable. So when politicians talk about the economy doing great, they're often talking about asset markets. When news headlines celebrate stock records, that doesn't mean life is improving for workers. It just means wealth is concentrating even faster. And Gen Z is entering adulthood right in the middle of this asset-driven economy, where everything essential costs more, work pays relatively less, and ownership is already locked up. That's why it feels like we're running uphill, because structurally, we are. And the hardest part is that most of us were never told this truth. We were told success was about individual effort, but no one explained how much the system itself shapes outcomes. No one explained how asset inflation changes opportunity. No one explained how corporate incentives drive wages down. No one explained how financialization rewrote the American dream. So when people struggle, they blame themselves, instead of realizing the playing field shifted. And once you see that shift clearly, you start to understand something important. This isn't just a Gen Z problem. It's a structural problem. And unless it changes, every generation after us is going to face an even higher price for the same basic life. Which brings us to the real question. If the system was redesigned to reward ownership over work, profits over people, and assets over stability, what would it actually take to fix it? So if the American dream was quietly repriced and the system now rewards ownership over work, profits over people, and assets over stability, the real question becomes this. What would it actually take to change it? Because none of what we're dealing with is inevitable. These are policy choices, incentive structures, systems that were built by people and can be rebuilt by people. Housing doesn't have to be a speculative asset. We could restrict corporate ownership of single-family homes. We could change zoning laws so cities can actually build enough housing where jobs exist. We could invest in large-scale affordable housing instead of protecting scarcity to keep prices high. Other countries already do this. And when they do, housing stays affordable. Wages don't have to stay disconnected from productivity. They could rise automatically with inflation. Workers could share in the value they create. Unions could be strengthened so employees have real bargaining power again instead of being individually disposable. Corporate profits don't have to come from squeezing workers. Stock buybacks could be taxed or limited. Monopolies could actually be broken up. Companies could be held accountable when they lay people off while posting record earnings. Healthcare doesn't have to bankrupt people. Every other developed country figured out how to provide coverage for less money with better outcomes. There's nothing magical about the American system. It's just designed around profit instead of care. Education doesn't have to trap people in debt. Public colleges used to be affordable. Some were free. Trade schools and apprenticeships could be expanded. Predatory for-profit institutions could be regulated or eliminated. None of these ideas are radical. They're normal in a lot of places. What's radical is pretending the current system is the only possible one. And here's the part that matters most. Real change has never come from people at the top deciding to be generous. Every major improvement in quality of life came from regular people organizing and demanding it. The 8-hour workday, weekends, minimum wage, child labor laws, civil rights, worker protections. All of it happened because people pushed back against systems that benefited the powerful at everyone else's expense. Not because someone in charge woke up one day and felt nice. So when people say nothing can change, history proves them wrong. It's just slow. It's uncomfortable. And it requires collective pressure. That's why voting matters, especially in local elections where housing laws, wage rules, and worker protections are decided. That's why supporting labor movements matters. That's why paying attention to who funds politicians matters. That's why talking about these issues instead of blaming individuals matters. Because the biggest trick the system ever pulled was convincing people that struggling is a personal failure instead of a structural one. Once everyone is isolated, tired, and blaming themselves, nothing changes. But once people start seeing the bigger picture, momentum builds. And I want to be clear about something. This isn't about hating older generations. Most of them played by the rules that existed at the time. This is about recognizing that the rules were rewritten quietly, and now we're dealing with the consequences. The American dream didn't disappear. It was turned into a luxury product. Affordable for those who already own wealth, out of reach for those just starting. And Gen Z is the first generation fully entering adulthood after that. Transformation was complete, which is why it feels so impossible sometimes. But impossible systems have changed before, and they can change again. Personally, I think our generation is waking up to these realities faster than any before us. We question things. We look at data. We don't just accept that's how it's always been. And that gives me a lot of hope. Not because things will magically get better, but because awareness is where every movement starts. If you understand that the price of the American dream was change, not because you failed, but because the system shifted, you stop blaming yourself. And when millions of people stop blaming themselves and start asking bigger questions, real pressure forms. That's how progress happens. Slowly, then all at once. So if you're struggling right now, feeling behind, stressed about money, worried about the future, you're not broken. You're navigating an economy that became far more expensive without raising pay to match. And that's not your fault. But it is something we can work to fix. By staying informed, by supporting policies that prioritize people over profits, by showing up locally, by talking openly about these realities, and by refusing to accept a system that only works for those already at the top. The American dream doesn't have to be a luxury item. It can be rebuilt into something achievable again, but only if enough of us demand it. If this video helped you see the bigger picture, share it with someone who's been blaming themselves for struggling. Leave a comment about what you think needs to change most. And if you want more conversations like this, breaking down the systems that shape our lives and how we can improve them, make sure to subscribe. Our generation isn't lazy. We were just handed a much higher price for the same dream. And now it's time to decide what we're going to do about it.